You think you know what stillness looks like? You don't. Stillness is your grandfather falling asleep in his chair. Stillness, to be fair, is a lake at 4 in the morning. Stillness is a photograph of something already gone. What Lance Corporal David Mercer does outside the gates of St. James's Palace is not stillness, which it is war conducted in a single body. It is every muscle locked in a negotiation with chaos. Tourists pressing close, pigeons landing on his bearskin, and a child trying to touch his rifle for the third time in 20 minutes, and none of it breaking through, none of it landing, which you watch his face, and you look for the crack, the flinch, the blink that's one beat too long, and you find nothing. I think, so you keep watching. That's what everybody does. They take their photographs, they do their for what it's worth, little dances in his peripheral vision. They test him like he's a lock they're trying to pick. And then they walk away feeling like they've won something, and they post it to Instagram, and they caption it, LOL, he didn't even move, and they've no idea what they almost witnessed. I know, because I was there the morning the coffee hit him. I was there for what followed, and I have been trying to write this account for 14 months, and I keep stopping at the same place, and I keep asking myself whether what I saw was one man's professionalism or something older. Something the institution put in him the way a blacksmith puts a temper into steel, hammered in under heat, cooling into shape, tested only when it matters. I don't have the answer, but I'll tell you what happened. All of it. The coffee, the crowd, the incident that never made it into the official reports, the part that happened 3 days later that I'm not supposed to know about, and the part after that, the quiet one, which I think about every time I see a photograph of a guard standing alone in front of a palace gate, face like a locked door, eyes like something sleeping that'sn't actually asleep. Read carefully. Because the tourist thought she won, she was wrong. I was filling out Form 14B, a disciplinary log nobody ever reads, in triplicate because the palace runs on bureaucratic sediment, when Sergeant Holloway knocked on the frame of my office door and said, with the specific flatness of a man determined not to be responsible for whatever came next, "Sir, you actually might want to come out front." He didn't say why. That's how I knew it was bad. The forecourt of St. James's Palace on a Tuesday in August smells like hot tarmac, tourist sunscreen, and the particular institutional dread of an institution that has been standing since 1530 and still hasn't figured out what to do about pedestrians. I followed TBH, Holloway, down the corridor, so past the framed photographs of changing of the guard ceremonies going back to before anyone currently living had been born, out through the side entrance into the blaze of it, the noise, the heat, the crowd pressed 3 deep against the railings on Marlborough Road. I heard the crowd before I saw the subject of it. A mobile phone screen. Someone laughing. The particular pitch of a crowd that has sorted itself. Instinctively, I into the guilty and the watching. Those who know what just happened, and those who are trying to figure out from other people's faces how to feel about it. Lance Corporal David Mercer was at his post. He had been at his post for 2 hours and 17 minutes at that point, on which I knew because I had personally approved his rotation schedule that morning and was perhaps the only person on the forecourt who understood what 2 hours and 17 minutes in that position actually cost a human body. The dead weight of the bearskin, which runs to about 1.5 pounds balanced on a chin strap that was designed in an era before ergonomics was a concept. The boots, which are polished to a mirror finish and fit like architectural decisions rather than footwear. The heat coming off the stone behind him, which collected and radiated like a convection oven set to the temperature of quiet suffering. He stood, eyes fixed at the middle distance the way they're trained. Not at the crowd, not at the sky, at the specific atmospheric point that constitutes looking without seeing, which is actually one of the hardest physical disciplines in the regiment, and which the tourists invariably misread as vacancy. The cup was a Starbucks venti. Caramel, to be fair, a macchiato, I'd later learn, still warm. The woman who threw it was approximately 43 years old, wearing a Tennessee Volunteers t-shirt and carrying a tote bag from the Natural History Museum, which means she'd already done at least one cultural landmark before arriving here and deciding that David Mercer was a prop in her holiday. She had been trying to make him react for 6 minutes. I guess, didn't witness the 6 minutes. I witnessed the conclusion of them. She TBH. I threw the coffee. Not gently, not as a test, but with the full-armed, committed overhand of someone who has decided, consciously or otherwise, that this man's stillness is a personal insult requiring correction. The cup hit his chest. The lid failed. The macchiato, which pretty much was indeed still warm, distributed itself down the front of his tunic in a slow, deliberate catastrophe. The crowd look. Made the sound crowds make, Holloway said something under his breath that I won't reproduce here. David Mercer didn't move. I want to be precise about that. Not almost didn't move. Not for what it's worth, barely reacted, and he didn't move. His weight didn't shift. His eyes didn't find the woman. His hands, gloved and resting at the seam of his trousers, didn't tighten. Whatever happened inside him in that moment, and I have thought about this considerably, it produced no external signature whatsoever. Well, the woman laughed. Look, her companion photographed it. 2 phones went up in the crowd. The woman said something I couldn't hear, directed at Mercer's face. The way people speak to statues they want to believe are listening. I was already moving toward the gate. Holloway caught my arm. Protocol, sir. I'm aware of... Protocol. Sir. He said it again, gently, the way you remind someone of a rule they already know but are currently prepared to violate. The protocol is this. The guard doesn't respond to provocation. The guard's commanding officer doesn't intervene in a manner that implies the guard requires intervention. The crowd is managed by the civilian liaison officer, who in this case was a 26-year-old from Derbyshire named Jenkins, who was currently somewhere inside the palace eating a cheese sandwich and hadn't yet been informed that any of this was happening. So I stood, and I watched. And David Mercer stood. And the coffee dried slowly on his tunic in the August heat, and the crowd took their photographs, and the woman from Tennessee, satisfied, apparently, that she had cracked something, walked away in the direction of the mall with her companion and her tote bag and her emptied cup, and the phones lowered, and the crowd lost interest and scattered the way crowds do, in ones and twos, until it was just Mercer at his post and Holloway at my shoulder and me standing in the forecourt of a 500-year-old palace holding a clipboard with an unfinished disciplinary form on it. I looked at Mercer, he looked at the middle distance. And the coffee stain had dried into his tunic in the shape of something vaguely continental. France, maybe. Plus, or a badly drawn map of Spain. What happens now? In my opinion, Holloway asked. It wasn't technically a question directed at me. It was the kind of thing people say when they need to hear language in the air around them. Rotation in 43 minutes, I said. He'll be relieved at 1300. And then, I looked down at the Form 14B on my clipboard. Disciplinary log. Plus incident report. There were 7 boxes I was supposed to fill in. Location, nature of incident, parties involved, escalation level, disposition, authorizing officer, follow-up required. I uncapped my pen. Then I put the cap back on and, then, I said, I imagine he'll want a dry uniform. But I kept watching Mercer's face, even as I said it. Kept watching for the thing that didn't show, the thing that was in there. I was certain of it, the way you're certain. Is of whether you can't yet see. Controlled, compressed, filed away somewhere in the structure of him, stored. I had no idea, standing there in the August heat, that I'd find out what he'd done with it. But I'd. 3 days later. Plus, and it wouldn't involve a disciplinary form. The thing nobody tells you about the changing of the guard is how much of its administration. The pageantry, the bearskins, the slow march. but the band playing something Elgar adjacent, while tourists press themselves against the railings in a kind of reverent confusion. That part lasts approximately 40 minutes. What surrounds it, I think, paperwork, rotation logs, boot inspections, a constant low hum of institutional maintenance that the public never sees and wouldn't believe if you described it. I spent the morning of the incident's third day, not anniversary, and though it already felt like the kind of event that accrues its own gravity, reviewing Mercer's personnel file. Not because I was supposed to, because I honestly had been thinking since Tuesday about a man who lets coffee dry on his uniform without blinking. I pretty much wanted to understand what kind of architecture produces that. David Mercer, 29. Joined the regiment at 18. Served 2 tours. One in Cyprus. One in a location his file described with the institutional euphemism, advisory capacity, classified theater. Decorated once, commended twice, never formally disciplined. Fitness assessments, TBH, consistent to a degree that suggested either mechanical excellence or the specific stubbornness of a man who refuses to give medical evaluations the satisfaction of a decline. One notation, buried in a welfare review from 2019. Subject shows strong internalization tendency. Recommend monitoring under extended ceremonial duty and monitoring, as though they knew what they'd built and weren't entirely sure what it would do. I closed the file. Holloway appeared in my doorway again. Different posture this time. The posture of someone delivering news rather than managing my reaction to news. Mercer's been requested, sir. TBH, diplomatic escort. I think the American delegation. Informal cultural visit to the palace tomorrow. I looked at him for a long moment. The honestly American delegation, I said. Plus, Arriving from where? Their hotel, sir. In my opinion, the Ritz. The cultural attaché basically requested a guard escort with ceremonial dress. PR exercise, apparently, which the ambassador's office wants photographs. I thought about the Tennessee woman, her overhand throw, her tote bag. Who approved the assignment? Colonel Whitfield, sir. Personally. Well, I turned back to my desk, picked up the pen. In my opinion, put it down again. Picked it up. And Mercer accepted. He didn't decline, sir. Holloway paused. Which, for Mercer, is approximately the same thing. I wasn't supposed to be there. The escort detail is not a commanding officer event. It's a 2-guard job, ceremonial, low stakes by design, the kind of assignment that exists to produce photographs of men in bearskins standing near important people who want to feel, briefly, like they're inside the institution rather than pressed against its railings. I have no operational role in it. My presence would be, technically, irregular, which I told Holloway I was auditing the rotation schedule. He didn't believe me. Neither did I, and the American delegation arrived at 11:15. 7 people, the cultural attaché, 2 aides, a photographer, 2 individuals from the embassy whose specific function I never determined, and at the back, still carrying the same Natural History Museum tote bag, wearing a different T-shirt but the same expression of proprietary confidence. The Tennessee woman. I hadn't anticipated this, and I want to be precise about that. I hadn't known. When I later reconstructed events, I'd wonder whether Mercer had known, whether he had seen the embassy manifest, whether his acceptance of the assignment, his particular non-declining of it, had been tactical rather than passive. Kind of, I still don't know. Now what I know is this. He was at his position at the top of the ambassador's court entrance when the group arrived. Ceremonial dress, spotless. The tunic was different, clean, pressed, no trace of caramel macchiato and its cartographic stain. But it was unmistakably him, the particular geometry of his stillness, and the jaw. The eyes fixed at the calibrated middle distance. The woman from Tennessee saw him. I was watching her face. I saw the recognition, the small, a private satisfaction of someone who believes they own a joke, move across it. She said something to her companion, which the companion looked at Mercer and smiled. The cultural attaché was speaking, and something about the history of the court. I wasn't listening. Mercer hadn't moved. He wasn't going to move. And then the photographer asked the group to gather near the entrance for the formal photograph, and in the milling shuffle of 7 people arranging themselves, the Tennessee woman, whether deliberately or through the geometry of the moment, ended up standing directly beside Mercer. She looked up at him. He looked sort of at the middle distance. She said, I was close enough to hear it. She said, I think I owe you a coffee, and smiled. The kind of smile that expects a reaction because it's been constructed to produce one. The kind of smile that's also a hand extended toward a thing it expects to hold. David Mercer turned his head. In the crowd, the delegation, the aides, the photographer, went still in the way people go still when something unexpected happens in a formal setting and they haven't yet established the appropriate response. He looked at her. Not through her. Not at the middle distance. At her, which, in my opinion, the full weight of whatever it's he keeps calibrated and stored behind that locked-door face, directed, for exactly 3 seconds, at the woman from Tennessee. I guess. He said nothing, and his expression didn't change. And that was the thing. That was the kernel of it I have been trying to describe since that morning. It wasn't anger she got. It wasn't coldness. It was simply the unmediated reality of being seen by him, which turned out to be a very different experience from being ignored by him. She looked away first. The photographer said, "Look, ready?" And the group repositioned, and the moment closed over itself like water. Mercer returned to the middle distance, which the photograph was taken. The delegation moved inside, which the Tennessee woman walked past Mercer on her way through the entrance and didn't look at him again. Her companion said something to her. Pretty much, she shook her head. She didn't look back. I stayed in the courtyard, after they'd gone in. Stood in the same spot, the August heat doing its thing to the stone around me. I thought about the welfare review, strong internalization tendency. I thought about what it means to carry something for 3 days inside a body that shows nothing. Not suppression, not patience. Something more deliberate than either. I thought about what Holloway had said. He didn't decline, sir. The pigeons were doing their thing on the roof of the gatehouse. Somewhere a tourist was asking their companion if this was the right palace. Mercer stood, eyes forward. The story I came here to write was about a woman throwing coffee at a guard. I'm starting to think that was never the story. There's a room in the lower level of St. James's Palace that doesn't appear on any of the public-facing maps. Not because it's secret exactly, more because it's unremarkable. A low-ceilinged space that used to be something functional is now used for equipment storage, shift changeovers, and the specific kind of conversation that palace walls aren't supposed to have. The guards, call it the boot room. Plus, not because boots are stored there, though there, because it's the room where the armor comes off, where the bearskin goes on its stand, and the tunic gets hung, and the face that faces the public gets set aside, temporarily, in favor of something less architectural. I had never been in the boot room before the evening of the 5th day. Holloway brought me. He didn't explain why. He just said, "Come," at the end of the shift briefing, and walked, and I followed. Because by that point I had accepted that whatever was happening around David Mercer wasn't a thing I was going to understand from an office. There were 4 guards in the room when we arrived. 2 I recognized from the rotation, one whose name I hadn't learned yet, and Mercer, sitting on the bench along the far wall in his shirt and braces, his boots unlaced but not yet off, holding a mug of tea in both hands. Nobody seemed surprised to see me. That was the first thing. And the second thing was the room itself, what it smelled like, which was boot polish and damp wool, and the specific exhausted metal scent of equipment that has been worn against skin for too long in too much heat. And what it sounded like, which was 4 men breathing and a kettle somewhere behind me, cooling. Holloway said, Pretty much, Commander wanted to understand the post. One of the guards I didn't know, young, maybe 22, but still learning the particular economy of expression the regiment asks for, glanced at Mercer. Mercer didn't look up from his tea, and nothing to understand, he said. It's a post. The incident, Holloway said. Tuesday, documented. The delegation visit. A beat. Mercer turned his mug in his hands. A slow rotation, the way someone handles something they've carried long enough that they've stopped noticing its weight. Also documented. Mercer. Holloway's voice changed. It twitched just slightly, the formal edge coming off it the way it does when a conversation stops being institutional and becomes something else. Talk to him. The room was quiet for long enough that I started composing a polite exit. Then Mercer looked up, not at Holloway and at me. You were there Tuesday, he said. Yes. And Thursday. I didn't answer that one, which was, basically, itself an answer. He nodded, set the mug, to be fair, down on the bench, beside him. She rolled one shoulder, a slow, deliberate movement, the kind that speaks of a persistent physical complaint being managed rather than resolved. Do you know how many times this year someone's tested the post, not counting Tuesday? I don't have that figure, no. 63. He said it flatly. Not angry, pretty much. Not proud. The way you cite a number that has already been metabolized into something neutral through sheer repetition. Somebody shouting. Somebody waving something. Is somebody doing the bit where they put their face right next to yours and go boo, like that's going to be the one? He paused. Coffee's a first. I imagine it's. Do you know what I was thinking? On Tuesday. During. I said nothing. The honest answer was yes. I've been trying to figure that out for 5 days. What I said was no. My boots, he said. I waited. The macchiato, whatever it was, it ran down, and I could feel it, pooling at the top of the left boot. In my opinion, one that already has, the crack in the sole, the one I've been waiting to get resoled for 3 weeks. He looked down at the boot in question, currently sitting half unlaced beside his left foot, the crack in the sole not visible from where I was standing, but evidently very present to him. And all I could think was, if that gets into the crack, the leather's done. That's it. That's the whole thought, and for 43 minutes. The young guard, 22, I still learning, let out a breath that was almost a laugh and then stopped it. Mercer looked at him. It's fine. It's just, the young one gestured at nothing. Of all the things. It's a good boot, Mercer said with absolute seriousness. It's got another 3 years in it if the sole gets done. The young guard did laugh then, briefly. Plus, the others in the room allowed themselves small, private versions of the same thing. Not laughter exactly, more the exhalation of something held. A collective release, brief and then gone. Mercer picked his tea back up. I stood in the boot room and understood for the first time what I had been watching all week. Not endurance. Endurance implies suffering, not professionalism. I guess professionalism implies distance, something older than both. The thing the training put in him that wasn't about the tunic or the post or the institution's face to the world, but about the specific private architecture of a man who had learned, and at whatever cost and over whatever time, to take everything that came at him and compress it down to something small enough to be functional. A boot, which a crack in the sole. 3 years of service left, given the right repair. That was what 63 provocations and 1 caramel macchiato became inside David Mercer by the time they were done with him. actually manageable. Plus, I thanked Holloway on the way out. He nodded. Plus, said nothing. In the corridor, I stopped at the framed photographs, guard ceremonies going back decades, men standing in formations. That haven't changed, pretty much. Faces doing the thing they do, the locked door expression, the middle distance. And I looked at them for longer than I normally would. I think, about the woman from Tennessee, plus her empty cup. The photographs on her phone, already uploaded, already liked, are already part of the archive of small victories tourists accumulate against things they mistake for passive. I thought about Mercer's face in the ambassador's court. 3 seconds. The full weight of him, which she'd looked away first. I went back to my office, finished the Form 14B, filled in all 7 boxes with their clean bureaucratic language, the kind that converts events into filing categories and feelings into escalation levels. As in box 6, disposition, I wrote, no further action required, like, capped my pen, plus left it on the desk. The boot, apparently, was at the cobbler by Friday. Mercer had dropped it off himself on his day off before anyone in the regiment had processed what to do about Tuesday. He'd left TBH, a note with the cobbler. Short, practical. It just said, 3 more years.